Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Virtually Connected, Where People and Tech Harmonize. It is being presented by the National Apartment Association's Operations Committee. My name is James Campbell, and I'm the Senior Manager of Industry Relations with NAA. I want to welcome all of our members in attendance. Thank you for joining us for this important topic. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping points. First, this presentation is being recorded and will be posted to our website and YouTube channel early next week. You may then share this presentation with those colleagues and friends who are unable to attend at present. Second, we have allotted time at the end for live questions and answers. You may type your questions into the Q&A or chat boxes on your screen, and we will share them with our presenters. Now, I am very pleased to introduce our presenters. Jacob Carter is the founder and CEO of NurtureBoss, a multifamily marketing platform that automates prospect follow-up and resident communication with innovative and hyper-personalized outreach. Carter spent more than a decade building marketing automation tools for the B2B, enterprise, and B2C spaces, staying at the leading edge of trends and new technologies. He is a self-proclaimed marketing nerd whose background has uniquely positioned him to build modern marketing tools for the apartment industry. Robert Hicks joined Portico Property Management with more than 25 years of experience in the multifamily industry. Prior to joining the Portico team, Hicks oversaw operations for multiple states within Greystar's desert region, including Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico, totaling approximately 150,000 units under his leadership and guidance. He started with Alliance in 2007 as Vice President of Operations and transitioned out as Division President for Alliance during the Alliance Greystar acquisition in June 2020. Alan Yu is the Managing Director and founder of Lumen Capital, a vertically integrated real estate firm specializing in the acquisition and management of multifamily assets. Yu began his multifamily investing career in 2016. Lumen Capital now owns and manages 5 apartment communities totaling approximately 1,000 units throughout Texas. Yu is a CPA, and prior to founding Lumen Capital was a consultant at Ernst & Young, Overmont Consulting, and Whitley Penn. Welcome, gentlemen. Now, let me turn the presentation over to Jacob.
Thanks, James. Excited to be here, especially with such a credentialed panel that we have. It was fun to listen to the intros. We're very excited today to cover the topic of where people and tech harmonize. So as a reminder, like James said, you can type any questions that you have in the Q&A section of Zoom, and we will answer them either as we go or at the end of the discussion. Leasing today looks and feels a bit different than it did just a few years ago. New processes and new technologies have not only streamlined the renter's journey, but also have changed the shape of what it means to be an on-site team member. However, today's modern environment does not mean that human interaction is a thing of the past. Augmented by technology, on-site teams today have more time to create deep and meaningful relationships with renters and focus on the parts of the leasing cycle that really need that human touch. So by finding that perfect blend of technology and human interaction, we can create the perfect experience for renters and on-site team members alike. So let's dive deeper into how the landscape has changed today, how technology and multifamily has evolved, and how we find that balance between tech and the human touch. So one of the changes that we're seeing today is renters' expectations and the technology built to meet those expectations. So Robert, let's start this first question off with you. Is new technology driving the change in renters' expectations, or is it the changing expectations that technology?
Jacob, it's a mix of both. Really, our renters and our prospects are comparing our industry to what their day-to-day lifestyle is, to how they purchase household items online, to how they actually reserve a hotel or a resort online, or even an airplane, air flight reservation. So really, the prospect and renter's expectation is compared to the rest of the world, and they are, desiring for us to have speed, accuracy, and the ability to what I would say is lease on their time and at their location.
Yeah, and thank you again for having us. So to add on to what Robert is saying, I think also in the last couple years throughout the pandemic here, renters' expectations have also changed because, as we all know, we are doing a lot of things more remotely, virtually. So those are the types of requests that we're getting from our prospects of, hey, can we do virtual tours? Can we do leasing remotely, doing everything online these days? Those are the expectations that have developed over the last few years.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Alan, kind of to the point that you just made, it really is these last few years that things have kicked into high gear. So how, in your experience, have these changes affected the leasing process for your on-site team specifically?
Well, I think over the last, 2021, 2022, or early part of 22, apartments have more or less leased themselves, right? Because the demand was so high. Our leasing teams have become a little bit lazy, so to speak, because it was so easy to simply say, hey, these are the units that we have, and they were pretty limited. And so renters had a fewer choice. But now as the market has evolved and demand has dwindled a little bit and availability has expanded, our teams are having to become and go back to what they were doing before, of really selling, really closing. And so those are the nuances that we've seen over the last year and a half to 2 years. Is it was easy to lease for a good amount of time, but now it's getting to get back to the basics of, hey, let's really need to buckle down and really do the work that we need to be doing.
And I couldn't help myself but bring up a buzzword that we're hearing a lot now, which is quiet quitting. And I wonder how these changes for on-site teams are being reflected in that phenomena that we're noticing. Alan, have you seen anything within your teams related to quiet quitting?
I think that term is an interesting one, because I don't want to say our teams have necessarily, done that per se, but it's just the kind of the natural result of the ease of leasing apartments in the last couple of years, that they've basically just had to do the bare minimum essentially. And they were, performance has still been fine. So they're getting used to just doing the bare minimum. And if we ask them to go above and beyond, some of our team members really didn't like that, and they moved on, and we had to bring other people in. So we've seen more and more, on the on-site teams, the turnover for that reason.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Robert, have you anything to add to that? Any changes that have affected the leasing process for on-site teams that we've seen in recent years?
Sure, absolutely. With these softening market conditions, as Alan said, our teams are now really back to the basics, is what I, like to say. And we have to really drive those and focus on the basics of leasing again, what we were doing 5, 6, 7 years ago. Follow up multiple times, double closing, managing an inventory. Alan alluded to that, where, a year ago, there may have been 1 or 2, points of vacancy at a community. Now there might be 5 to 10, and it's really driving that inventory now, and identifying for the prospective resident what they're looking for, and how we can add value to them, but also to our community and the investor behind it.
Yeah, great. That all makes a ton of sense. Automation and AI are hot topics in multifamily right now. We're seeing leasing teams use new technology to supplement work that they used to do. So, Robert, how does this create more meaningful and enjoyable work for the on-site teams?
Well, Jacob, it's a really good question. And as I talk quite a bit about, we have the resident prospect expectations, but now our associates, their expectations are extremely high too from their employer. They want to have access to tools and platforms that can really drive, how they do business and how they can make their living. What is the technology at any given company? What is the platform they're able to use to really make their job simple so they can focus on all the right things? That's the interaction with the resident, with the prospect, to really give them a great experience. So they're looking for that too. And I that's something I really want to underscore, is that, as the consumer or the prospective resident, or even our current resident, have these high expectations, our associates have choices too. And they can decide between numerous companies in our industry of who provides the best experience for them to be successful.
Yeah, and I wanted to add on to that, because you're right, Robert. I think there's so many choices now, and our leasing teams, our on-site teams, they don't want to simply just be another robot, right? Another cog in the wheel, right? We can require them to say, hey, we need 3 touches per day, both text messaging, phone calls, emails, things like that. But we need to provide the technology platforms that remove some of the roboticness out of that, the job that they're doing, because they don't want to become robotic, because that's a lot of the feedback that we get of, hey, you're asking us to do these things, but it feels very robotic and very mundane. I want our teams to focus on the true value add that they bring from a human to human touch aspect, and have our technology stack be able to handle some of the more, repetitive, mundane tasks that we don't necessarily need a leasing agent to be performing, every single day.
Yeah, and that's a really good explanation of kind of the separation of what automation and AI can be used for versus what really needs that human touch. And I want to talk more about what really needs that human touch. But to go back to the beginning part of that first, Robert, we can start with you here. What problems have you seen that AI and automation work best for? Or put differently, what are those non-human aspects that technology can lead in?
Sure. It's really, what I'm looking for is a technology platform is, what Alan said is, how can we, avoid and overcome the repetitive aspects of the business? What can the platform do to really help us vet out what is the ideal prospect, what they're looking for? But then, you take it into, the platform should help us with consistency, from a fair housing standpoint, from grammar and spelling to some of these tasks when, let's say the human touch may miss some of those things sometimes, and to really create a platform that is consistent and accurate.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that, Robert. I think the pieces of the puzzle that I think automation, technology, AI, those types of things can help with, not only the things you mentioned, but also any type of self-service aspect to it. Residents, really want to be able to do things on their own and not wait for the office to respond to them, because they want to do things 24/7. And that's what we've gotten used to, being able to, order something on Amazon and be here the next day. They want to go on their resident portal and be able to do all these different things. And from a prospect perspective, they also want technology to be able to answer all the questions that are easy to answer, right? What amenities do you have on your property? We can go to the website and look at that. But sometimes, having that ability to get all that information up front, because a lot of times our leasing agents are getting those same questions day in, day out, and the technology should be able to help us alleviate answering the same questions over and over.
Sure. And Alan, you said it once, to me, our residents and our prospective residents want us to come to them where they want, whatever venue it is, on the web, and at what time they want. I think that's critical to being there when they want it and how they want it.
Yeah, I think the term I threw out there when we talked last was meeting the prospect and the renters where they want to be met, whether it be on social media, whether it's a text message. The renters today, especially the younger folks, they don't really like picking up the phone, to be quite honest. You pick up the phone and you call them. A lot of times people don't pick up. So we've gone to a lot of text messaging platforms, and the response times on text messaging are so much greater than a phone call. So kind of being able to tweak those communication avenues and approaches are certainly very, very key to success in the leasing process.
A couple of the themes that I have heard while you guys are talking is really what, Robert opened with and Alan reiterated, which is that the world has changed and therefore expectations have changed. We can get on board with that in multifamily and we can meet those needs, right? Or start to fall behind. One of the other things is that, technology doesn't get tired, right? We don't miss those things when automation is running that maybe a human would. So an example that I didn't hear, but I know that we've chatted about in the past is things like financial fraud protection. That's a great example of where, a piece of technology is not going to try to get through something quick at the end of the day, for example, or going to be tricked by, some sort of technique or mechanism. So there's a lot of great areas where automation makes a lot of sense. As we move into our next slide here, we can talk more about a point that Alan just made too, both of you, that modern renters really do like to do their own research, right? They don't necessarily need to ask someone questions that they can find the answer to online. But there does come a time in most leasing journeys where that human touch does have a major impact. So Alan, we can start with you. At which steps in the renter journey are renters and leasing teams interacting the most in today's world?
Well, truthfully, the technology aspect of it, I feel like is a lot done on the front end, answering the questions, getting them pre-qualified, getting them into, being able to set a tour and actually coming to the office. And that's when the handoff really should be on the human to human interaction. All that work that we've done in the front end to bring them into the office. Now the leasing agent needs to be keyed in and specifically tailored his or her strategy and his or her tour specifically to the needs and wants of that prospect. And so our technology stack should be able to distill all that information and provide that information to our leasing consultants to be able to gather that information, whether, hey, this person has a cat, the cat's name is whatever. I prefer a downstairs unit, facing a courtyard, whatever it may be. And so be able to take those specific wants and needs and really tailoring that tour to that prospect is what we're looking for.
Jacob, I'm
Robert,
looking, go ahead, Jacob, pardon me.
No, I was just going to say, where are you seeing that human interaction is still playing a large role in the leasing cycle?
Sure. As Alan mentioned, it's really the handoff. Once the resident wants to come or the prospective resident wants to come to our communities, I want to put all of my associates in a position to give every prospective resident, the high touch and out service, everybody else. I really want to exceed the expectations of that person. So when they do come in, our teams and our associates are not in the back office on these mundane, repetitive tasks. They're out in the front, really giving the touch and the service that's expected. Is it great resident functions? Is it, walking the community? Is it, as Alan mentioned, do we know the name of the pet they have as they're out walking? And really being, what I'll just say is just very accessible when needed, when the resident or the prospective resident desires it.
Yeah, I love that. And I know that, as somebody who has been a resident in an apartment many times throughout my life, that makes a major difference, right? When you're making a decision of what to do when renewal time comes up. So we've been touching on these different areas in the lead to lease and lease to renewal life cycle where that human touch really makes a big impact. And Robert, that was a really nice segue into talking even more specifically on the resident side of things, how this just carries a ton of weight. So Alan, how does human connection, the relationship between on-site teams and residents specifically, how has that had an impact at your communities?
Yeah, I think we've been, in the last, few minutes here, been talking about prospects, but really the technology should also, alleviate some of the pressure on the office team to then be able to interact more fully with our residents, right? Be able to do more resident events, do more, one-on-one interaction and following up with how their experience has been living out our communities. So those are the things that we want our leasing consultants, our assistant managers, our managers to be out doing more and more. And so that has created an impact on renewal rates. So having that ability to to do more of those things, because people renew at communities because they like the place they live and they feel that, you know, they have a voice and that they're heard. And so if we're out there proactively getting that feedback, that's what we want our teams to do, instead of only interacting with the resident when something goes wrong.
Yeah, that proactive versus reactive, I think, is really important to highlight, right? Because that's my big takeaway with what you just said, Alan, is that, you know, you could sit back and wait for somebody to complain or to ask for something, but that's not what makes a good experience. What makes a good experience is anticipating those needs and getting ahead of them and creating a good experience for residents throughout the whole time as a resident at your property, right? So I really like what you said there. Robert, anything, you've obviously talked a bit about this already today, but anything more to add on kind of the human touch with residents specifically on top of what you've already said?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You know, again, I'll just reiterate. My strategy is to have my teams and my associates, not in the back office, but having full command of the resident experience and the prospective resident experience is, you know, a command of that physical asset, you know, out visible at the community, you know, giving that high touch and out servicing everybody else. So they're visible. I want visibility from my teams. And if we can create a technology stack, you know, on that platform that lets them do that, you know, I think we all win.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, as renewals are coming more and more into the spotlight, especially as we go into 2023. And we've already talked about a lot of great examples of creating meaningful interactions so that we can, you know, capitalize on renewals and help grow our renewal rates in the coming year. So for example, you know, I've heard, you know, taking command of the situation, I've heard great resident events. Alan, can you elaborate a little bit on strategies that you've seen or are planning on implementing around increasing renewal rates as we go into next year?
Yeah, no, so I think what we've been trying to do here in the last few months is, you know, set a, you know, monthly resident event and doing more of an outreach, say, hey, please come to these events, and doing more of a, you know, a tailored approach to that. Whereas we're not just doing pizza parties on Fridays, we're actually going out there and doing surveys of our residents of what types of events would they like to see. So we're changing that a little bit, because our previously we've kind of just gave them what we gave them and went with it. But now we're having to go about, you know, doing a more tailored approach of seeking that feedback of these are the events that we want to have on property. And also doing you know, I spoke about being proactive, and now we're you know, having our, even, you know, and we've been talking a lot about our maintenance, or sorry, our office team members, so managers, assistants, and leasing consultants. But we also now put it on our maintenance team members to go out and reach out to our residents and leaving cards after we complete work orders in their unit. And so having that approach also has been a pretty good way of us showing that we care. So every work order that's completed, we have a little note that all the maintenance team members carry with them, and they write a little short note and leave it on a very visible area in the apartment.
Yeah, I love that. So we've seen that there are parts of the lead to lease and lease to renewal journey that technology thrives and does really well. And there are parts where the human touch is more impactful. But how, Robert, have you seen processes change or evolve because of technology, that may be new processes being added or old processes being removed?
Well, you know, Jacob, the evolution is real, and that's where technology, you know, it goes parallel with each other. It's hand in hand. And, you know, what it allows us to do is really focus. And, you know, you've heard the word tailor quite a bit in this conversation. We can tailor now everything we do, you know, to what's best for the business, what our strategy is. It's understanding, you know, the personas of each, you know, of our residents and our prospects, and, you know, what do we do? What can we eliminate that's not of value to one, our residents, but then two, also our investors. and how we run our businesses. And if we can take out the mundane and the repetitive tasks and really focus again on what drives a great resident experience and a great bottom line for our investors, that's what we're focusing on doing. And our teams need to be well trained, and we need to evolve with the expectations of both our associates and those residents.
Alan, anything that you've noticed on your end around process change with the increased use of technology with your on-site teams, new processes being added or old processes being removed?
Yeah, I think to add on what to Robert's points there, we've definitely removed some of the old school, pen and paper approaches to our leasing process, and we've done more, and we're continuously doing more and pushing everything towards electronic signatures, electronic documentation. Instead of having a file, that's this thick, it's all should be electronic and able to be accessed online. So those are the processes that we're trying to eliminate and take away from having a stack of paper that thick. Residents like it, our team members like it. And so we're trying to evolve with that. And also a lot of the being able to submit maintenance requests through a portal, those are the things that we're now always have available, instead of having, we used to have people have to come into the office, fill out a physical work order form, and we obviously eliminated that. No one likes that anymore. They want to be able to do it online, be able to do it just at the on the spot and just have it done.
Jacob, it's all encompassing. It's all encompassing, but it's what the resident expects, and again, what we're driving as a business operation. To your real question, I should have mentioned, it's the focus on how we do market surveys now, the technology, that's driving that's made it easy, accurate, then subsequently and segues into pricing, and how we, focus on our inventory of, the unit selection and how we drive that process. That's really what I believe, how I look at things and I've strategized with my companies, is the focus on the business operations, ultimately that affect our resident, experience, but, what is it as an investment too?
And if I may add here on this point, I think going back a few points to what you were saying, Jacob, earlier about financial fraud and those types of things, as we get into, late 22, 23, I think there's going to be more and more issues that on-site team members face from, fake paycheck stubs, people falsifying documentation, things like that. So the technology that we have available should help us alleviate some of those stresses from the on-site team members, because they're not trained to be a forensic accountant to be able to identify whether certain things are false or not. So we have to utilize technology to assist with that, because that's a lot of the stress that comes from a leasing consultant's desk is, hey, I don't know really whether this person's paycheck stub is accurate or not. I don't know if that's true or not. Okay, let's use technology to alleviate your stress. And also that, to Robert's point, that helps the property performance from a investment standpoint of, hey, if we have this renter that has now falsified one paycheck stub, that has huge implications and consequences all the way down the chain, especially with the financial performance of the properties.
Yeah, I love it. So the theme that I'm hearing right now is a good technology provider is going to solve multiple pain points. It's going to increase the value to the business, right? At the end of the day, we're running businesses that need to make money. It's going to increase the joy or experience of on-site team members to be employed at your business. And it's going to increase the experience of prospective renters and existing residents at your property. So it sounds like a good solution, a technology solution, is going to touch on multiple points, right, of value that it brings to the table. That's kind of the theme I've extracted out of what both of you are saying here.
Correct.
Great. So as we move on to the next slide here, I want to start talking about how there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, right? We want to strike that perfect balance between tech and human interaction. So operators need to adapt based on their community's needs and the renters' needs. So Alan, how have you experimented with finding the right blend for technology at your properties?
Yeah, this is a great question because our portfolio is pretty varied. We have assets that are class C, class B, and one property that's an A-class property. So all those different types of levels require a different balance of and different type of technology solution. And I will say what works for one property may not necessarily work for another one. We could throw all the technology that we want on there, but if our residents and our prospects for that particular, the demographic for that particular community does not prefer using that type of technology, then it fails, right? So we have to always be very cognizant of, hey, is the prospect, are our residents going to embrace that technology, and only offer those if we believe, yes, those residents will really think this is useful and will use it.
And Robert, as you, in your past and history have experimented with various technologies at your properties, how have you tried to figure out what the right blend at the right property is for different tech stacks that you've leveraged?
Sure. Outside of what's happening, if it's not one size fits all, as Alan said, at a community level, it's really, what I focus on. What's the culture and the philosophy of your your company, and what your corporate structure is. Not all of us, have the infrastructure to handle everything we want, and we have to pick and choose. It's somewhat of an a la carte menu at times, to build our stack. And that's really what I focus on a lot of times, is what's the right fit for our culture and really our company strategy. What's going to work well, along with the site level, what we're doing, how well can we train it? How well can we continue to evolve the training at any given time? How much will our clients, I'm in the third party business, how much will our clients support, and be willing to provide, the resources for it, their communities.
Yeah, great. And, one of the things that we're talking about as we answer that question that I just asked is different communities, different markets, different asset types. So how does that, or how big of a role rather, does that play when determining what the right tech stack for each community is? Meaning the market that it's in, the class or asset types, the renter demographics, senior living, student housing, that sort of a thing. What big of a role does that play? Robert, if you want to kick us off there.
Sure. The role is really, you have to understand what your profile is in the persona of each individual community, and we can dive deep into this one. Student communities are much different than what might be an active adult, and how do they want to be, the accessibility to our staffs, and the time of the day, and that tech platform. Yes, everybody, I believe that technology has become so agnostic to age, let's say, but really there's still certain segments of our resident profiles that drive the technology more than others. And I think you really have to vet that out, as an operator and as a company, is to identify where it's working best. And we have that real-time information that will give us whatever it is, the empirical data, to say this is working or not in real time.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think there's also, the issue is for our operation is, does the resident want that technology, or do they want more human interaction? I think we talked about this before. Is, hey, where are the points where human interaction is still needed? And some of our properties, one property might, they might be a little bit younger leaning, more student population, and they're very tech savvy and they want all that. They want everything, that we all just discussed. And they could care less about going to the office and speaking to someone. However, on the other hand, we have communities where we have some older demographic, some more, Hispanic, maybe English is not their first language. So we have to staff appropriately for those needs. And we have to recognize that some people just want to have that interaction with the human person sitting in front of them right there, and having that interaction versus, hey, push them and basically push them away and say, hey, look, everything has to be done here online, but they don't like that. They're like, can I just not do this here with you? I was like, absolutely, you should be able to do that here with us. And so having that kind of very strict policy of this is only the way we do things, and you might be pushing some residents away and really not focusing on what their needs truly are. So being able to recognize that is really important to me.
Sure. And Jacob, with the advanced technology, what I should have mentioned is we can ask the question now. Their data, a lot of our decision making, is supported by data. But really, with the technology, we can ask our associates and our residents very quickly what's working or not working for them, and we can tailor it with the data that that's provided to us by our partners, and really come up with a great platform and solution. But I think we have to ask the question all the time there's two legs to that: our residents and our associates. What do they like, and what makes their experience great?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And to pull out another theme or topic that I think came up a bit when answering this recent question is, in order for a technology solution to make sense, it needs to be able to adapt the same way you all adapt when staffing a property, for example. So multiple language support is an example that I heard, right? So ensuring that we're leveraging technology that has the fluidity that our on-site team does when changing messaging so that it speaks to the right demographic or geographical market, or changing language, or whatever the case may be, right? So I think that's worth calling out as well. We talked about training for just a second, but I want to dive way deeper into that because, with all this different tech options that we've discussed, our on-site teams need to be trained on this, right? So, Alan, we can start with you. How have you changed your training methods? How are you equipping your leasing teams for success with different tech stacks that you're using at your properties?
Yeah, so I think this is very similar to how we talked about renters and prospects want a self-service option now. Instead of, for example, if I or our regional manager or someone else, sitting live and teaching someone and training someone one-to-one, what we realized what works best is having recorded videos and having them out on a training platform for our team members to be able to go out there and pull, okay, this is the video that I want to learn about how to do renewals. This is another video about how to perform a financial move-out statement. And so these are the things that, to Robert's point earlier about consistency, what we found out is having these videos on our training platform really emphasizes and allows us to be consistent in the way we do things. And so, and them having access to that, 24/7, it's just on a online platform, they can pull it immediately. They don't have to wait for, myself or a regional manager or someone else to get back to them for them to actually continue doing their job. They go up on there, they can even search different topics. Hey, pull out that one video. It's a 5-minute video. They can even speed it up and off they go.
Yeah, I love that. You're saying you can use technology to train your team on different technologies, right? And that's a great answer, I think. Robert, have you seen any evolution in the way that you train new team members to allow folks to get educated or level up on different tech stacks that you're using?
Yeah, absolutely, Jacob. The industry with our partners and our providers are so good now, and they're moving it so fast where it's just not, you don't train your teams or your associates one time and then hope for the best. As that evolution happens with whatever product, platform, or service that we're receiving from one of our great partners in the industry, it's constantly moving, and we have to constantly to then it's continuing education, continued training for our teams, so they're staying up on it as it gets tweaked and, things change. It's just not a one-stop time of training. It's constant follow with them to make sure they're on top of it. Plus, if we're doing our jobs right, we're identifying where we're not using the technology properly or at its maximum. And that's where we should be as, very good to come back to our teams and say, hey, we're doing good, but if we continue to tweak it here, we're doing great with whatever the technology platform may be.
Yeah, I love that. And you hinted to this, I think, but I want to directly call out that we should be relying on our vendors, our tech partners, to be providing us with the material that we need to train our teams, right? It shouldn't be I'll use NurtureBoss, for example. I know NurtureBoss a lot better than you do, Robert. So I'm going to create really great NurtureBoss training material, and that's an expectation that you should have of me, right? So I would share all of us to kind of have that expectation with our partners, that it is a team effort to create the content and materials to train our on-site teams with that continued education, like you alluded to.
Yes.
And I just want to add there too, Jacob, is technology is so good at being able to constantly being improved, right? So every week there's coming out with new releases of, hey, we tweaked this part of the system. It may be NurtureBoss, it may be another vendor, it may be your property management software or whatever it may be. But it seems like there's always something that's being tweaked constantly. And so to Robert's point is we have to also then be aware of what those changes are, and then rely on the vendors to provide that training to our teams, or really on a weekly basis almost to say, hey, these are the things that we've seen that are changed, and they've changed these things because we want to improve on these and these aspects of the platform, technology, product, whatever it may be. And so that's a constant evolution, and they have the team members that we have to be on board with that constant evolution and be always learning. So when we recruit and we're bringing new folks on, those are the qualities that we also have to be looking for.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the themes that I've heard several times is kind of this cohesive strategy, right? So the whole point that we're talking about here is how do you blend tech and human touch, right? And the underlying theme of that is cohesively as possible. I wonder, how are we working to create that cohesion internally? So let me elaborate a little bit on my question. We have folks in marketing that play a large role in generating leads and finding us prospects. We have folks in training and operations that help us create the strategies for outreaching to those folks and for communicating with our prospects. We have on-site teams, and in some cases, specific teams focused on resident journey and resident experience. So how important is internal cohesion when creating a strategy for what it feels like to be a prospective renter, a renter, and then a renewed renter at our properties, in having success blending our tech and human touch? Robert, I wonder if you have any experience you can share on that.
Yeah, Jacob, you really need that cohesion is ultimate. That's where the perfection, ultimately, it happens. Is it's marketing, it's training, it's maybe even accounting, it's the operations coming together, arm in arm in this, running together, and asking each other the questions: is this working? Which part is not? How can we subsidize or augment, whatever might be lacking? Because it's really not one department really running it for us. I mean, we've seen now as, our industry has shifted incredibly, fast. Is you need every part of your company, every department, every division working together for that ultimate goal of, success and, experience for our residents, our associates, and profitability.
Yeah, everything right now.
Anything-
No, I just want to add to that. It's everything right now is shifting so quickly, so we have to be very proactive in adopting those changing technology options as well. So we can't just sit on our laurels and say, "Hey, this worked last year." It's not going to work. Maybe it's not going to work. Today it may not work 2 months from now. But what's working now may not work 2 months from now. You have to be very quick to always seek that feedback and always quick to make those changes if need be.
Yeah, Alan, what you just said reminds me of the Warren Buffett quote that I'll paraphrase that says, when others are greedy, you should be fearful. When others are fearful, you should be greedy, right? So don't sit on, don't rest on those laurels. Don't say everything's fine. It's been fine. It'll be fine. Say this is the time to realize that there's changing tides ahead of us, and how can we stay ahead of it, adapt and evolve so that we can continue to have success. I just have 2 more questions for you guys. So just a reminder to anybody who's tuned in, please, questions for the Q&A. We'd love to address some of those at the end. But my second to last question for you all is, Robert, you've used the phrase build our stack several times while we've been talking today. And I think something that I hear a lot on the vendor side is an ongoing debate of what's better: multiple point solutions, meaning multiple vendors and pieces of technology that solve specific problems, or one solution that does everything, right? How do you determine what works best for your sites? Robert, if you can lead us off with that one.
Sure. Gosh, that's a tough one, Jacob. I don't know if there's not a right answer to that. It's, again, as I really focus a lot of my conversation on, it's a philosophical question to each company, whoever, is listening, what is the culture of their company? What do they actually have, as a support mechanism? Can they support, as you said, multiple, points and parts of the business? That can take, sometimes a lot of calibration, and you need the human side to do that. And that's payroll. Or, is it better for a company to use that one point, that one platform to do it all for you versus the a la carte? Again, I've run it both ways. I think our vendor partners are so good, they're excellent, at what we're doing right now, where the integration of things are working, it's working very well these days. And I think, what works best for your company, what works best for the profile of your associates, and, really it's that culture. So I don't have a great answer, because I think it's an individual ability for each company, what they have access, and, as I said, that human capital side to support it.
Yeah, well, I think that is the great answer, right? Alan, can you expand on that for us?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. That's a very interesting question, because like Robert, we've kind of done both ways. So previously, in a different company that I had, we've done things where it was very piecemeal. We tried to select the best of breed for this specific thing, this specific function, and then try to get it all integrated together. But then what we realized is, coming from my perspective of running a smaller company, we're not a gray star. We're not, we don't have tons and tons of resources and staff at hand to be able to help us with this stuff. A lot of that falls directly on my shoulders to be able to handle. So what we've realized is, sometimes it is okay to go to a one-stop shop for a good portion of our tech stack, but then really be selective and picking the specific additional functionalities to add on. And so that's what we've come to realize works best for our company and the situation that we find ourselves in. But each individual company, if you have more resources, it may make sense for you and your culture, like Robert said, to pick best of breed of the technologies that's out there. But I also want to kind of go back to a little bit and speak on really creating learning environment. Because what we found out for our team members is if we brought on the wrong, and this is now going to recruiting instead of maybe something else, but I think this is important enough for me to mention here is you have to create a team that embraces that change, because if we're asking and adding technology on pretty frequently, we have to have the team members that will also embrace that and not be very stubborn and say, hey, I just want this, I've learned this, and that's that, and they're not very flexible in adapting with us as we change.
Yeah, that's great. I love those answers. So that can bring us to our final wrap-up question, which is I'd love for each of you, and we can start with you, Robert, to tell us what advice you would give operators who are still experimenting with that tech-human balance and trying to customize, their perfect blend.
Sure. Get real precise answer to that. Ask your teams, what do they want? What do they need to have, give them a great experience and let you remain competitive in this very tight, employment world. That's first and foremost. And then two, it's something we used to say at Alliance all the time. There's no way you let the ghosts of the machine, run your business. You still have to keep it calibrated. Our vendor partners are so accessible and give us the time to really be able to work with them and, create an environment, a technology environment and platform for your company that works well. I mean, again, if it's a one-stop shop or you a la carte, you piecemeal things and, do, some bolt-ons to certain things, it works very well. But again, you can't let the ghost of the machine run the business. You still have to ask a lot of questions, keep it calibrated, and stay very close to your partners and make sure, you're staying up on it and it's working extremely well.
And how I would answer that is, I think a lot of us, from, the quote unquote corporate side, the either the owners of the company or the VPs or, that level of folks at your company, those are the types of folks who typically are the ones making decisions on various technologies. And these are the technologies we want to implement because we feel like these are the things that will help the properties, will help the company, whether that be from, higher returns for the investors, better, culture for the company in general. But I also don't want to, I think it's really important to at least have maybe one or two stakeholders from the on-site teams to be able to bounce ideas off of. Hey, grab a couple leasing agents, grab a couple of managers and say, hey, when we're starting to decide on different technologies to add, bring them into the fold and ask them, from an on-site perspective, from your day-to-day, how is this going to impact you guys? Because if we make a decision from a corporate team level and it doesn't really help them on the on-site team level, it may actually make it where their lives are less convenient and less efficient because we're not thinking of something that they're thinking through. Especially, like folks like me, I've never been, the coming up through the industry as a leasing agent, as a manager. And even if you have, maybe it's been 10 years since you were in that seat. Maybe you forgot what it may feel like. So I've always taken an approach of, hey, we want to bring in at least a couple of those on-site team members to really vet the technology before we really launch something.
Yeah, that's great advice from both of you. I'm going to add one piece to that, which is I think it doesn't matter if it's rolling out new technology, at your on-site, for your on-site teams or at your properties, or if it's, a 2023 New Year resolution. I think anything we do, you should go into it asking yourself, what is the outcome I'm trying to achieve? Why am I doing this? What is the goal I'm hoping for? And then just as importantly, am I set up to measure if I hit that outcome, if I achieve that goal, right? So, if we're trying to increase the number of tours that we get scheduled, and that's why we're using vendor X, am I prepared to measure what it was like before and after I had vendor X, right? So really focus on the outcome or the why behind the piece of technology that you're purchasing or implementing, and then really make sure that you're set up to measure if you achieve the why, right? So that's kind of my last little bit that I would add to that. All right. Well, James, we can toss it back over to you now as I've reached the end of my questions.
Well, that was great. Jacob and team, very much appreciated. I want to thank you all for this, for this really helpful perspective. Again, open to audience Q&A. Please type your questions you may have for the presenters into either the Q&A or chat boxes on your screen. Well, a question for you, Jacob. If, as we're waiting for folks to type in a few things, are there any questions you feel like you might not have asked our two guests here?
Yeah. So one thing that I'm kind of curious about is that, we've talked about a lot of the different areas that tech has really melded in well with the human touch. What do we think multifamily is particularly good at when it comes to combining tech and the human touch to create better experiences for on-site teams? So I can start with an example to kick us off, which is that, we've seen a lot of resident-focused mobile apps come out that are all about making everything available at the fingertips of residents. And that's, I think, uniquely something multifamily has really thrived at. Are there any examples, Robert or Alan, that you've seen where multifamily's just done a great job at leveraging technology to create better experiences for prospects, renters, or on-site teams?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. I think what I've seen the evolution happen from when I got in the business years ago is really the accuracy and consistency. That's the biggest thing for us. We've taken out a lot of the ability to remove the human error in a lot of ways. As I said earlier, grammar issues, spelling issues, things we need to stay focused on, from fair housing to fraud, protection. Some really important things that protect us as operators and business owners.
Yeah, I think what we've been doing a really good job on is allowing our residents to be able to submit work orders on their resident portal, and being very quick to be able to respond to those, because our maintenance teams, we've essentially eliminated ticket runners, right? We've eliminated ticket runners. Our maintenance teams, they have all these apps on their phones. A work order comes in, apartment 102 has a water leak, boom, it's on their phone immediately, and they'd be able to go right there, and whoever is closest to that building can go right there and handle it, instead of having to, manager, hey, so-and-so ticket runner, can you run this ticket to so-and-so? And that's what I think, number one, we've done really good at. And then also just the ability to have virtual tours very easily accessible now. I think that's another area we've done pretty well on.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're coming up against the hour. I think this has been really awesome. I think we've given our audience a very comprehensive and insightful viewpoint, lots for them to think about. And so again, I want to thank all of our presenters for really an outstanding webinar. Now, to our audience, for additional resources, NAA maintains an online portal for its many offerings and operations solutions for the rental housing industry. The URL is featured at the bottom of that slide. And also, if you've enjoyed today's webinar and would like to view more, you can always visit our YouTube channel for those many NAA webinars that are now viewable on demand. The URL is featured below. So finally, again, I want to thank Jacob, Robert, and Alan. This has been really, really great. And I want to thank our audience. We appreciate your membership and appreciate your attendance. So to all, have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This has been a blast. I am grateful for the opportunity to sit down with people way smarter than me, like Robert and Alan. And thank you to NAA for having us and putting this on.
Thank you.
Robert, Jacob, I appreciate the opportunity here, and thank you, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, thank you.